This video is the fifth in a series of timely topics for school leaders in school improvement. This video was produced by the statewide team for school improvement at the Lancaster-Lebanon IU13, a leading education service agency which works in concert with the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Reproduction of this video is not permitted without written consent by IU13. This video is divided into three sections. First, I'll share some guidelines and strategies for including in your school plans for monitoring implementation. Next, I'll share guidelines and strategies for including plans to monitor your impact. And last, I'll direct you to specific resources and next steps. In the last video, I compared school improvement to retirement planning. If I've invested money for retirement, my banking institution will provide me with monthly, quarterly, and annual reports. These reports will allow me to track my progress and to determine if my strategy is having the intended outcome or if I need to adjust. Today we'll see how this same concept is relevant to school improvement planning. A key aspect of ESSA is its commitment to the use of evidence-based approaches and continuous improvement to drive better outcomes for students. Implemented well, a cycle of improvement grounded in evidence-based approaches can improve student outcomes and increase return on educational investments. Today we'll focus on the create a plan phase of the cycle of improvement. Specifically, we'll talk about including action steps that set you up to monitor your progress on implementation and to monitor the impact that your work is having. Writing your action steps typically takes place in April, and steps for monitoring will be included then. In previous videos, I've emphasized the importance of a through line. This is a way to ensure that the work you're doing is connected to your vision and your identified needs. This video is focused on ensuring high-quality action plans that include steps for monitoring your implementation of those plans and the impact that those plans are having. Let's start with your plans for monitoring implementation. To connect briefly to our banking analogy, this is where you might monitor your monthly spending. Are you keeping to your budget? Are you spending and saving as you planned? As you're including steps for monitoring your implementation, here are a few items to be sure to include. First, make sure you have a clear description of how your team is going to monitor whether or not the action steps are being implemented. Make it clear about who will be involved, when the monitoring will take place, and what tools will be used. You'll be asked to identify outputs. Those are tangible products, like agendas or schedules or survey results, or they're shifts in practice, like asking high-level, open-ended questions or implementing specific engagement strategies. These serve as checkpoints to let you know that the steps are being implemented. Keep in mind, they're not goals, but they're signs or items that you can see to let you know that steps are being taken. These following questions come from the school plan and guidelines document. I'll refer you to that at the end of the video. These questions can guide your team to determine what to include in your plan. What will you look for to know that each action step is being accomplished? How will you know the action steps are being implemented according to your plan? In school improvement, we often refer to three types of routines. Two of them are focused on monitoring implementation. First is a tactical routine, and we suggest that this routine takes place about every 2 weeks. It won't take too long, and it could be included in another previously scheduled meeting. This routine offers the time for a small implementation team to ask, did we do what we said we were going to do? What needs to happen next? And by whom? By when? Then, on a monthly basis, a larger group comes together for a status and solutions routine. Each implementation team can share what they've done or their status, and they can propose or ask for conversations to solve challenges that they've faced. At the end of the video, I'll point you to some more resources for these routines. Here are a few possibilities, and these are just ideas. You'll certainly have more. Many schools include walkthroughs in their action steps. So you could simply check these off as done, we did walkthroughs. However, to move beyond compliance and to ensure that the walkthroughs are meaningful, consider what you'll do with the information that you gathered during the walkthroughs. Include in your plan, how will you share this data with others? What will happen as a result of that data? Maybe it's a cause for celebrations that strategies are really being implemented. It could be the impetus for appreciating teachers who are changing their practices. Maybe it leads to updates to your professional learning plans to review the expected changes if you aren't really seeing them in practice. Other teams include PLCs in their action steps. This can be something very different to each team. So, what will you do to check in and see that they are being held or facilitated as intended? Will each team maintain agendas in a shared folder so maybe a point person can review them? Will leaders visit PLCs? Maybe you'll ask a member of each PLC to report out at a monthly faculty meeting. Whatever you decide, include that in your action steps. And last, it's one thing to do professional development. It's quite another to follow up and see what changes took place as a result of that learning. What follow-up can you plan for? These are some ideas of action steps that you might want to consider in your plan. Here's an example of a tool that an implementation team could use to track the implementation of their action steps. This is an agenda that could keep them on track. It includes a brief review of the next steps that were identified at their previous routine, and then the team identifies successes and challenges, so what they've been able to complete and where they might be facing some roadblocks. Last, for Objective 2, they identify next steps that are needed according to the plan and what they might need to do in order to accomplish these steps. This tool is an implementation tracker. It can be so helpful. I'm going to go to a live version of this. Here's an example of that implementation tracker. You can see that the priority statement is listed along with a link to the team's evidence-based strategy. Then there's a space for each action step, the person responsible, the anticipated start date, completion date, and the action step status. At the biweekly implementation routine, the team can double check to mark where they are with the status of each step. It helps to keep them on track, to know what's coming up, what's on time, what's completed, and behind. I want to show you an example of how you can plan for monitoring within this plan. If we go down a little bit here we have an example on row 33. Survey students to find out what motivates them to attend school during the first month of school. That's an action step. To ensure that that happens, a monitoring piece is to share the survey results at the October monthly routine. That's a way to ensure that it happens and to make it meaningful and that the results are shared. Let's scroll down a little bit to this purple text. I want to point you to row 37, where there's an action step that says implement incentive challenges. That's an action step and they will implement that work. Let's think about monitoring the impact of that work, and we look at line 38 that's in purple text. At that quarterly routine, there's an opportunity to review data from the incentive challenges and determine on the impact on attendance compared to previous years. You can see that then that is repeated to review that incentive challenge data at the second quarterly routine in January, at the third quarterly routine in April, and then at the end of the year quarterly routine in June. Those are two examples of how to include monitoring impact and implementation in your school improvement planning process. Here's an example of an agenda to guide the monthly status and solutions routine. Each implementation lead can pre-populate some of the information in this table. This allows the larger team to monitor the progress of each priority, to problem solve challenges together, and to identify areas where more support may be needed. At the end, everyone walks away with clear next steps. Let's move on now to monitoring the impact of your work. This is similar to the quarterly and annual reports you receive from your bank to see if you are on track to meeting your savings goals. In continuous improvement, we refer to this routine as the impact and strategy routine, which takes place on a quarterly basis. Remember those quarterly targets you wrote? This is the routine that allows you to analyze data and determine if you've met those targets. Basically, did our work or our plan do what we thought it would? Based on the answer to these questions, your team may decide on strategies and next step. When you're writing your action steps, include a description of how you will know if you've met your goals. What routines will you use? What tools might you rely on? As you're getting ready to write action steps to prepare for these routines, these questions come from the school plan and guidelines document that I'll refer you to at the end of the video. These questions will guide you as you consider your routines. When thinking about your impact and strategy or quarterly routines, there isn't one right way to hold this routine. But you'll see in these two examples that there are some key conversations that you want to ensure take place. But first, identifying roles before the meeting helps everyone to understand where they will be expected to contribute. The analysts, those are the people who really understand and can speak to the data. Assign a point person for that. The accountable owners are the people who understand and can speak to the work that's been completed. And last, you've got a note taker, timekeeper, next step tracker, and if you're virtual, the chat box monitor. These roles help to ensure that anyone who wasn't at the meeting is able to keep up, that you stay on track and don't go over time, and that you have clear next steps to follow and you don't have to try and remember what was said throughout the meeting. The next step tracker keeps track of it all throughout. In this example, each goal is added to the agenda as well as the actual data so that the team can determine if their work is having the expected outcome. This example outlines how each priority might be discussed. The data, successes, and barriers can be entered prior to the routine. Notice how there's also a clear area for next steps to be identified. This video is only an introduction to routines. There are so many more resources to support you in monitoring both the implementation and the impact of your work. These QR codes will take you to plan quality rubrics and to that guidance document that I referred to earlier. As you can see, the rubric is in both spreadsheet and PDF format. Let's go to the Continuous Improvement website for Pennsylvania. I have the URL and the QR code here, but I'm going to take you directly there and I'll show you where to find additional resources and information. Here we are at the website for Pennsylvania's Continuous Improvement resources. On the right-hand side, I'm going to use the third option down and click on Go Create a Plan. Once we get there, we'll slide down and we're going to go to the drawer that says Action Planning for Success. When I open that drawer, there's some information listed, and I'm going to click on Learn More about Action Planning for Success. And here are some of the tools that we've talked about. So the second bullet, the template that school teams can use to develop an action plan. That biweekly implementation tool is listed there. I'm going to go back up to the top now, click on that breadcrumb to go back to the main site. If you want to learn more about implementation and monitoring to adjust course, then you have an option to click on the right-hand side in the gray box, Effective Implementation or Monitor and Adjust Course. I'd like to also point you down towards the bottom of this list on Learning Modules. I'll click there, and you can see here you have specific learning modules for creating a plan. It addresses establishing implementation teams. You have learning modules geared towards implementing the plan and also for monitoring the plan. And as you can see, there are more for adjusting course. Now that you have more information about including action steps for monitoring the implementation and the impact of your plans, take some time to review your evidence-based strategy and your action steps. What tangible products would you expect to see if a school was implementing that strategy? Then talk to your SIF or another individual who's supporting your planning process and ask them for some guidance. I hope you feel more knowledgeable about planning for monitoring implementation and impact. If you'd like to talk to a member of the statewide team, please send us an email. at pdecsi@iu13.org.